Welcome to City Shrinks, a zero-filter podcast bringing the conversation about mental health into the 21st century. We are your hosts, Gina
and Athena, two New York City therapists with over 30 years of experience. For today, we put down the notebook and pick up a mic and give you full access to real talk with real professionals.
This is not your typical mental health podcast. Here, the goal is to keep it 100% real with you. We are City Shrinks. Hello. This is Gina. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Okay, so today, what are we talking about? We're talking about anxiety, right?
We're continuing where we left off from last time.
So let's review a little bit. What do you think? We should do a little review.
Sure.
If you didn't hear it, and you probably should listen to it, but if you didn't hear it, the basics of anxiety are that anxiety, first of all, it's curable. So why is it curable? How does that work? What does that mean?
Controversial statement.
I was just going to say, oh my goodness.
Ooh,
right?
How dare you say.
Wow. So here's the reason why. And this will make sense. Think about it.
Eventually.
So it's learned behavior. It's a learned pattern of thinking. Anxiety equals control. I'm going to run through today exactly what covert and overt control are. And we're going to really understand that. And if control equals anxiety, then what is control? Control is fear. Fear-based thinking, fear-based living. You're in fear. I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should. Maybe I shouldn't. It's that constantly living in fear. But how did you learn to live in fear? And what is fear? Fear is simply negative thinking.
You know, anxious people speak a certain language. Just by the way people speak, you can kind of get an idea of, you know, how their brain works, how they see the world. If you're really listening and you really pay attention, you can hear it in their voice, right? Just the negative thinking, right? It's, if you go out there, well, watch out for this and watch out for that. Or, you know, it could be any variation of those things, or it could be about decisions, right? Oh, if I do this, then that may happen. If I do that, then that may happen. So, you know, think of it as kind of a language that you're speaking. And is it hard to learn a new language? Yes, but it's not impossible, right? So shit is hard, but it's not impossible. And that's what I think we need to really focus on.
I use that also that, so when somebody says, oh, I don't know, and they're kind of doubtful, that negative thinking is always, always, always taught in childhood. Always. Now, you could we're in a this planet has a great war going on. So those children who are in that great war will probably have anxiety, no doubt about it. That had nothing to do with the parents. But we're talking about day to day. What does that look like in your parenting? Are you teaching negative thinking? And so...
And are you a negative thinker as a parent, right? As a parent, do you recognize, my favorite thing is actually when I say, when people ask me what the difference between being pessimistic and a realist is.
What
right?
does that mean?
Meaning, what is me being negative and what is me being realistic, right?
Yes. Because realism would then be grounded in boundaries. And boundaries are everything. Mm-hmm. When you have anxiety, your boundaries are very poor because the parent didn't teach you that. They didn't respect your boundaries about what you want, how you think, how you feel.
Right. And I see that a lot, right? The uncertainty that people live with, even though they have many resources, right? They could have...
A patient told me today, she says, I said to her, so are you going to school? And she said, I think I'm going back. I don't want to go back. And I said, okay, well... Let me ask you a question. Who made the decision for you to go to the school that you chose anyway? She said, well, I made it, but my mom was really strongly for it. I said, okay, so that was wrong because your mom should have no bet in the race because she doesn't have to live there. She doesn't have to deal with the place, the school, the people, the education. And my patient said, well, does that make sense? Wasn't that her job to make decisions for me? And I said, no, to help me make decisions. And I said, well, why would she need to do that, especially at that age? The goal is to teach you to think, to make your own decisions, not to
Correct.
help you with those decisions. You don't need help. You can make your own decisions.
Right, and to teach you how to deal with in retrospect, bad decision, right? And help you learn how to cope with mistakes and cope with failures and get really good at it, right? Because you notice that every time you fail at something, you actually feel more confident. That's how it should be. But what happens is people get to a point where they avoid failure, right? Failure being the negative outcome that they don't want to experience, feel, sit in, etc. Because
That's
all
that
your
fear,
life,
fear,
right?
fear,
That's that
fear.
fear energy, and that's the same fear energy that your parental figure, whoever was responsible for you, kind of taught you how to avoid negative outcomes all your life, because in reality, they were also trying to avoid their own negative outcomes that you might be tied to.
When the negative outcome actually is not negative. I say that, listen, certainly if you are 50, 60 years old, you got a very short runway, a very short runway. But if you're 20 years old, was it a bad outcome? Was it a wrong decision? No, it helped you learn yourself. It helps you move toward a direction that you want to be in. It is all about that path. I want to say one more thing about this, the language, because I like that a lot. And if we break it down to how you cure anxiety and you look at that language, you say, what if slowly I learned one new word a week, and then one new concept a week, and then we started doing that. Now, the fact of the matter is that because you're actually not learning a new language, that is your original language put forth by nature. Nature says you're not to be afraid, you're to be cautious, you're to learn your limitations, you're to move forward, make bold moves, and then assess. But it was taken out of you. What was put in you was negative, fearful thinking by your parental figures. So now I'm out of my own language. I've been taught that my own language about how I instinctively know what can work for me has been beaten out of me. It has been taken out of me and replaced with how I'm supposed to think based on how you think. I want to do what I think you want me to.
Correct. And it's interesting because, like you mentioned, the instinctual versus the programming is what I like to call it, right? You use the word brainwash, I use the word programming, because essentially that's all it is. I always tell people, they're like, oh no, I just got to go find myself. I have to and I'm like, what are you talking about? You're right there. What you're really trying to do is uncover what's already there, what's all the shit that's been piled on top of it. You start taking out a layer, unlearning, unlearning. And then you have that memory of being, right, who you were before you were conditioned.
It's not amazing?
Of course.
And that's why it's curable. So
Right.
that's the short answer. How is it curable? Because you can get to that.
Right.
You just have to have someone that understands that concept in front of you to help you peel back those layers.
And it's just exposing yourself to times that you can do it that way as opposed to a way that you were programmed, and then you create, right, a new pattern that you reinforce, and you'll get to the same place that got you, like we said last episode, to where you are now. Because essentially that's all that happened, right? It's just kind of repetition, opportunity, reinforcement. And here we are.
So I like that a lot because, it is the layers, and I do use brainwashing, but maybe that sounds a little harsh, especially
No.
especially when especially when you're talking about your parents.
Right.
So that would be when you talk about layers, I put those layers in my system into stages.
Okay.
Right? So the layers are my stages. So it's a very short show.
Yeah.
But so this is a year program. And but what I have to say though is that I'm going to do 2 or 3 pieces of it. But the first stage is that you reconcile with your childhood. It's like the movie Scrooge, which I love. That's my favorite movie. Next to the other one, which is the same reconciliation, The Wizard of Oz. Right? So what happens? She goes over, she's miserable, she's meeting people to help her on her journey, right? The therapist,
The tin therapist, the scarecrow.
therapist, right? And so, and then she meets really herself in the end, and she realizes, oh, wait a second, it was all about me. It was all about the, the authentic me, my soul.
I had the power to go home whenever.
Yeah, yeah. So I have the power. I always have, and I always will. And the same thing with Scrooge, which I think is just really, he was in therapy, wasn't he? Was he in therapy because it was all kind of like a dream, but it was, and he was, and it's like a hypnotherapy.
I was just gonna say, it's like
vibe
he was hypnotized.
happening, right?
You know, the word psyche, right, where psyche comes from. Psyche in Greek actually means soul. Right. So
Yes.
so its origins, right, is very tied to the, before science and before technology and whatever, PET scans and, blood tests and all that stuff, there were these intuitive, right, more intuitive methods of psychology, right, understanding that the soul is responsible, right, for, the possible mental chaos or possible, it started in religion. It started with priests. Priests were the original, kind of therapists or, so if we think about the history of psychology, it's really just us kind of coming back to it, right? All this kind of trending spirituality and this
also,
and that.
But my system is based on every piece of a system combined into one. So that mindfulness, that's what I call it, right? Because that mindfulness is really about spirituality.
Right.
It's really about thinking about yourself in a very intense, personal way, right? It's not about you meditating necessarily or any one particular thing. It's about how do you think about yourself and what you need and not have other people on your mind like your parental figures, which is a space of, again, brainwashing or conditioning. So that's the first step. So my first stage is all about looking at your childhood. Now, most people don't really have a problem with that. They get it.
What do you say to the parents that are listening to this feeling attacked? Because they are. It's very hard.
Yes. And I get that, but I don't know. Get over it. I mean, because it's one more piece of parenting that, stay on your job, because at any point you can change the trajectory of the entire situation if you're a parent. Right? Do something about it. Do something different. Let me think about it in a way that, again, the anxiety says, oh, I have to be comfortable. And if I have to feel blame or shame, I don't want that. I can't.
I have to avoid discomfort, avoid negative outcomes.
At all costs, at the cost of my children, my partner, my health. I cannot be uncomfortable.
Sanity.
What don't you understand about that?
Well, if they haven't reconciled their self with their parent, if they haven't reconciled, as a parent, if you have not had your own reconciliation moment.
That's called a mess.
Right. Equals intergenerational, right? So now we just pass that shit down. We pass
over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Yes. And welcome to America, because that's what we do.
Yep.
So we get that quickly out of the way. It's not so bad because most people knew that when you were 18, there's a space in you that nature allows for you to hate your parents. You want to reject anything that they stood for. I want to do me. Get out of my way. No, I have to do. And that's natural. It's okay. If that didn't occur and you were broken, no, you have to be beholden to me. I'm your mother. You owe me. You're not being a good child, son, daughter. You're not. I have to. So I'm holding on to you. So I'm breaking your spirit of what nature wants me to do, which is break out. I'm 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. I need to do me, right? Who am I? So most don't have a problem with that, but sometimes you have a big problem with it. Right? You cannot let it go. I need to have the love of my mother and father. I need to. So I can't say anything bad about them. They did a beautiful job. They were perfect. They got me to this. We're not talking about that. You have anxiety and depression.
Right.
How did you get that?
And I think that people often say that if I can acknowledge the mistakes made by my parents, then that means that I don't love them.
Yes.
Or they don't, so that
black and white. Things are very black and white when you have anxiety. It's either all or nothing.
And that's not what we're saying at all, because let's face it, especially, this is, New York City, and New York City is a melting pot of I can't even count the amount of culture, right? So we have a lot of first generation young adults, right? So we're talking about people coming from different places where collectivism is their main source of survival, right? The family's under one roof. It's actually essential to their survival to kind of take care of their parents, take care of their feelings, take care of their emotions, et cetera. It's kind of normalized, right? So obviously there's a lot of mental illness, anxiety, and depression going on, even in the collectivist cultures, even when there's this kind of unspoken law, right, that we are all a unit, and if I reject your love, because that's what it feels like when you tell your parent, and the parent feels that. The parent also feels rejected by their child. And a lot of people, that's something I bring up a lot, that it's also, the parents also feel a sense of rejection from their child. And I'm like, wait a minute, but so whose rejection is more important, right? So the child is in the room saying, I feel rejected, I feel invalidated, I feel this, and then the mom or the dad or whatever.
Well, so do I. What are you doing for me? And that's what I'm saying about how the parent takes the stance of, I have to be comfortable.
But they're still a child, essentially.
Right. Makes perfect. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. So now who's doing what? Who's taking care of who here?
Right.
How can anything get done if those are the dynamics?
Right. And some, I see that a lot, and sometimes when, let's say, especially if the marriage is not good, their children become this emotional validation and whether it's for attention or for love or this and that. And, unfortunately, we know the divorce rate's no secret. The divorce rate in this country is
like 70%.
Crazy. Like
I don't
whatever
even know.
amount of
You know
fucking
what?
wild.
Listen. The statistics that I once knew are like pre-pandemic. Like everything I knew before the pandemic,
ramp that shit up,
sure.
yeah.
I'm not so sure it exists. So I'm not so sure what I know. What the hell do I know?
What the hell happened to? Yeah, exactly. So it's so many aspects of our life, whether it's parenting and partnerships. It shows up at work. I have all of these are all relational consequences.
How can you? So that's the piece, right? If you have anxiety and depression, it's in every aspect of your life.
Correct.
It cannot but be. And so for you to be in denial about that, it's only because so many people have it. But that doesn't minimize the fact that it's showing up. It's showing up in how you physically feel, and that's also a piece of my work, right? That's also a stage. Like anxiety manifests itself in a physical way first and foremost, and then it goes into the backwards brain. So first. But it's everywhere. It's in your behavior. It's in how you think, how you function, how you get a job, how you don't, how you're moving, right?
Right.
I mean, it's bad.
It's bad.
And if you don't have any inner peace, because ultimately my definition is that you don't have inner peace. So the definition would then be of anxiety. You wanted to say something about like what is the difference between
Yeah, I have
being anxious and anxiety.
Yeah, we had a question from a listener, as it was an Ask Athena moment, and their question was, how do I know if I have anxiety or not, right? So what is, I guess people are wanting to know, well, the systems that the systems that we use, and who does that apply to? What is the difference between reacting anxiously to something and having chronic anxiety, right? Treatable anxiety.
So what we were talking about the fact that every generation chokes and mutilates a word, a medical term. It was crazy for a long time meant that you were depressed, right? So, you're so crazy. Oh, you're crazy. It's
Right.
crazy. That's old. And then bipolar. Oh, they're so bipolar.
Right.
Yeah,
now,
you're so
now
bipolar.
lately it's autism. If I have one more client asking me if they're autistic because that shit went trending on TikTok, I'm telling y'all, like it was hysteria for a long time too, right? That's the old school one. Back if we go further back, it's just words are very important, people. That's why in any system that we use, I mean, language is so important. You know how many people they overuse the word anxiety.
I like the old school best, right? Let's just keep it simple when we talk about, depression, anxiety. It's generalized anxiety disorder. They even try to, give it a letter acronym, GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. And within that category, there are then many types of anxiety. But the bottom line is that they're all really the same.
Correct.
Right? They all stem from that need to control, that fear, that negative thinking
It's
that
the
can be
language.
stopped. Right? That is
Right.
that language. Your language is negative thinking. How do you stop the negative thinking? So that's that. So it doesn't matter what it is.
Right. And so those are the questions that people ask, apparently if you are anticipating a happy event, I'm so anxious. I'm like, well, that's not the appropriate fucking word, but you can use that if you want. I mean, it's just so terrible because we're contributing to the normalization.
Yeah, that's the
okay.
thing.
You don't know how many people, and I evaluate them. We do the train, we do this, we do that. They're trying to describe to me, they're like, yeah, I feel depressed. I'm like, okay, we're going through it. I'm looking at their grooming. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at I'm like, you just sound fucking bored, to be honest with me. Like, that's what I feel. You sound bored. What you're describing to me is boredom. Now, when you say boredom, your brain has a set of solutions that is triggered by the word boredom. But what's the set of solutions triggered by the word depressed? Nothing. Defeated. Lay in bed. I ain't got shit to do. Blah, blah, blah. Well, words matter, people.
Yes, and it's so much more.
It's not
so
cute.
Much more than
It's
that.
not cute.
Yeah.
I'm anxious.
Yeah.
It's not. And y'all need to stop. If there's
Yeah.
anything y'all take away from this, do not overuse that word for every single
and
range of emotion.
And somebody said, well, part of it too is because we don't really use a lot of words for our feelings. We're kind of stunted. We say, how you doing?
Make
I'm
me bring
good.
out my emotional
I'm bad. I'm, but there's thousands. There's thousands. Someone said to me wrote me on Facebook and said, once again, the psychological community has, taken over a word, so we all can't use the word anxious. And, listen, I get it. And I love words, but we could find a more specific word to use, especially in the current climate.
Correct.
It's serious. So when you say that I have anxiety, we have to say, oh my goodness, I am sorry. You have got to get that fixed, and you can. And trying to live with that, that's not acceptable.
Right. And there are ways that language helps people really kind of figure out what their actual baseline is, because little do y'all know, every time you say I'm anxious, I'm depressed, that word has an energy to it that your body needs to respond to.
And we talked about that in our last
The Buried
number
Podcast
one.
Files?
Was it? Was this our last one?
I don't
When we
know, but
said-
y'all need to stop. That's my damn point. I can't.
Well, because it's again, if you're ruminating, and that's one of
Right.
the things that you do when you have anxiety, you get stuck on a thought, you can't let it go, and the thought is that the rumination means that you're just going over a thought, but that's not it. It could be an entire concept, and it's often for an extended period of time. It might be days, weeks, months. It's not 10 minutes. It's not, right? And so you get stuck on that. Now, the real problem with getting stuck and ruminating is that you're not receiving information when you do that. The brain is not really receiving anything else. It's shut down. So you're not getting new information. You're not getting the truth. You're not learning anything. So if you're 15 and you're going to school, you have missed, 6 months of the school year because you are ruminating. So you don't have ADHD. You have anxiety. You could get the information if your mind would settle down. It's not that you can't absorb it. So that's my framework, right? That's the first one, is that you are looking at your childhood in a way that doesn't take you 5 years. We're not doing all that. We're just looking at it very simply, how you were parented, and we're going to deal with it and head on.
Right. And a barrier to the progress that brings really is you also reconciling the idea that liking and loving isn't always the same. Okay? That's another thing.
It's very gray. Emotions are very gray. Feelings are very gray.
I'm like, you could not like something that they do, and you could still love them, but you may not like what they do, or you might not like what they say.
And you may need a break. You may need to pull
break.
back for you. Do you?
I was
right?
just talking to a client today about that. I'm like, sometimes the shutdown and the distance is to preserve the relationship, but you don't see it that way. You see it as them abandoning it. Meanwhile, they're trying to recharge and get their shit together so that they can come back to it,
Yes.
right? And
yes.
so
but there's the
it's
fear.
very gray.
Oh my God, you're going to leave me. That's going to happen.
Yep.
You're never going to speak to me. Nobody's going to like me. I'm going to be judged.
I
My
gotta
sister's
control.
going to say that.
Let them blow them up, blow up the phone. Let me do this tactic. Let me do that tactic. Get them to stay. And it's like, okay, y'all, listen. Me and Gina, we see through a lot of shit. Okay, and we know that y'all don't see through it. We can, that's obvious. But when we say something, and you know that resonates, but now all these thoughts about why you can't allow it to resonate show up, that's your anxiety.
Yes.
Let's just put it that way.
Preach.
That's let's just put it, all those little but indecision, people would say, oh, I'm lost. I'm like, okay, you just can't make a decision. I don't know if you're fucking lost because you're right there and I can see you, but I can see how it feels that way. But
Yes.
at the end of the
But
day.
again, if the child was never taught to make a decision, if the child was never given the space,
Are you sure?
that's a classic New York.
Are you sure? You sure? You sure? You want the ice cream? Nah, you don't like the ice cream. You
sure
sure?
you want
You
that? You
usually,
sure?
you usually get chocolate. Why are you going to get chocolate? Why? Because the mom fears, well, you're not going to like it. Now you're not going to have ice cream. I told you. I don't want to be right, but I do want to be
I'm
right.
rushing you too. I'm rushing you because I have things to do.
Correct.
Please, come on. I got, come on. What are
Let's
you
be
doing?
safe.
I'm not trying to help you learn to make a decision. I have to go to the store and you got to hurry up.
And that's why the intergenerational anxiety is the reason why we can't move forward.
My last two things,
Mm-hmm.
or for today, are what is covert and what is overt control. So that's part of my system.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important. So overt, easy to see, in your face, overt. Control.
Example.
Screaming, hollering, yelling.
Mm-hmm.
You hitting somebody, you have issues of control. You're smacking, pinching, I don't care. I don't care if you think it works. It doesn't. The yelling, the raging, all of that is about control. So that's easy to see. And wanting people to do things and then getting upset when they don't do what you want them to do. But what is covert control? It's covered, it's hidden. Can't
Right.
see it quite as much. And I say that when you talk about covert and overt control, the best way is to think about a hamster on a wheel. That's my thing. A hamster on a wheel. So he gets on that wheel and he's spinning around and around and around. He's not going anyplace. Right? He could sit in that hamster cage. I know the hamster's not so popular in New York, right? Little cage. It's a dog and cat world. But you see them and they're in their cage and there's a wheel in there and he's going around and around and around. He could go for 20 minutes, 2 hours, 6 weeks, and he will still be in that cage on that same wheel. And that is what it is like to have anxiety. He will not be in London or he won't be in California. He'll be right in that cage. The same way that when you ruminate and you spin that same negative thought, nothing is getting done. I know you want it to do. I know you think it is, but nothing is getting done. Now, take that and add another hamster on the wheel.
Oh,
So
share the
now,
wheel.
there we go. So now they're really, it's hitting the fan. Now we're going around and around and around. It looks like one is chasing the other. He's not chasing him because he's not going anyplace. No one is going anyplace. That's an argument with two people that have anxiety. We can't even know what we're arguing about. I don't know. Nothing's clear. But it looks like one is controlling the other. Now, if you flip them, it looks the same dynamic. So now it looks like, oh, wait a minute. Now you're controlling me. I'm controlling you, and you're controlling me. So the dynamic of control, when you have one person who's covert and overt, and one thinks, oh, you're trying to control me, and I'm not going to have it, and this is what it looks like, but you're both controlling, and here's why. This is also the hamster on a wheel theory. So how does it look like when the person goes out into the world and is so lovely and kind? How many lovely and kind people, you go to a funeral or something and everybody is saying, oh, he was so kind, he was so lovely, nicest person in the world. Oh, your father did that, your mother did that. And the kid is saying, really? They were nice and kind? I never saw them. They never gave me anything. They were selfish. They didn't spend it. But everybody else thinks that because that person has to have that persona in the world. I have to make you think that I'm perfect. So I have to say, yes, I'll loan you my rent money. Yes, I'll pay for dinner because I'm trying to control your point of view of me. And I will do whatever I need to do that.
The people pleasers, listen up.
Right. And that's what that's about. It's not about you people pleasing. It's about you controlling.
Pleasing yourself. I always tell them that. I was like, you think you give a shit about people? Oh, it's for you.
Yes.
It's for you. I'm
That's
sorry.
Right. That's right. That's
I'm
right.
sorry.
Come on. Because if you were authentic, you would say, you know what? Everybody, we have to split this tab. I cannot pay. I have children at home. Right?
That's
I have
why
a wife at home. I have
passive
things.
aggressiveness exists.
Exactly. So that's when you know, when you see somebody that's so nice, oh, you're just so nice, you're so nice, because you do everything, you pick the kids up, you leave your own kids behind, you make the cookies, you're up at 12 minutes, and you're thinking to yourself at midnight, making those cookies that you volunteered to make, why the hell am I doing this? You did this, why didn't they make their own cookies? I don't know why they couldn't, when you could have just said no, but you're taught not to, because the goal in life is to control how people see you.
Because the imaginary guilt you're projecting, right, that parental relationship or your guardian relationship, doesn't necessarily have to be parent, whoever the hell raised you.
Yes.
Okay, you're projecting that onto whoever I always say, it's the same story, different characters. I tell all my clients that. It's the same story, different characters. You're just going to project that shit onto whoever's in front of you at the end of the day, because that's your brain is already programmed that way. So if you are trying to people please and you feel some type of way after that, well, guess what? It's not about people, okay? It's about you and you trying to control that negative outcome of guilt or rejection that you are, right, negatively thinking your way into that scenario by saying, well, if I don't, they might get mad. If I don't, then they might this.
And these are people that you actually don't care about, because if you cared about them, then you would show them your authentic self so that we could really have a real relationship.
So you're not feeling safe. If you're not feeling safe and you feel like you can't say no, y'all need to look at yourselves in the mirror and say, okay, what's going on here? If you feel like you can't say no, or you feel like you can't speak up, or you feel like you can't say what you really feel, well, you need to really question and say, well, it's not about the other person. It's about what makes me so anxious about about disagreeing. What makes me anxious about saying no? What makes me anxious? That's the shit you got to work on, because that's another thing. Y'all spend a lot of time blaming the other person for everything, and in doing that, meanwhile, you're 80% of the problem. I'm not saying they're not. I'm not saying they're not 20% of the problem.
Well, because again, right, two hamsters on a wheel.
Right. But they're 20 and you're 80.
Well, listen, because if there's two hamsters on a wheel or three, you can get off.
Right.
You can always make the decision.
Gotta go.
I'm getting off. Right.
Right.
I'm not going to engage in that. I'm not going to. Why am I trying to make you see my point? Why do I need that from you? Why do you have to? Right. Like a patient said to me, well, Gina, I just want to make sure that you got my notes, and I want to know, did you read it, and and I said, do you need that from me? What is it that you really need? Do you need things from other people to that extent that you need to be validated? Is there a way that you can validate yourself? Of course there is. 100%. Of course there is. Because this way you're being your authentic self and you're speaking your truth from your soul. Who is it that you really are? And don't worry. People will find you. Those that are meant to see you will find you. Who is not meant to see you is not meant to see you.
That's a fact. I say that too, just in a different way. I just tell people that, if you do you, and whoever falls out underneath you because you're doing what's best for you, they're not for you.
Play the hand that's dealt you.
They're not for you.
They will fall in your path.
Because as a people pleaser, you're doing that for everybody else. And then you're like, wait a minute, why are these people not doing as much as I am? I'm like, well, why the hell are you doing as much as you do? That's the real question. Okay? So, once you remove that control aspect, you can actually start to see yourself. Okay? And that's where we're going with this.
Oh my goodness, it's so freeing, isn't it? That's where you get that inner peace where you just don't have to do anything that you don't really want to do.
And people love you, for your no's, for your rejections, for your boundaries. I mean, there's no greater love than that, y'all.
And it's so relaxing to have that. Yes, you're not going to have 200 friends that way, but you know what? There's only 24 hours in a day. And so, people do take time. That's the thing. They do take some time, and it's okay that you only have 3 or 4 friends and that they know you, and so you spend your time wisely. It's a limited amount of time on the planet.
Right. Yeah.
So here we are. It's the end of our discussion today. And it's so broad, isn't it? It's just so much.
I feel like we need to really do and give this subject justice, we should add a part 3.
We just keep going.
Basically.
Part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Might be 4, might be 5 at the end of the
But
day.
next week,
until you get it.
or in next episode, we're going to do depression.
Yeah.
Because we got to weave it in so that
Yeah.
you understand. If you're getting some help from listening to us, you have to understand, right, that depression is very real. It is really the problem. I know you think your anxiety is the problem. I know you do.
no.
I know you want to, but it's not. It is
It's in
really
the
that
way.
depression.
It's in the way.
And that's another reason why we know anxiety is easily cured. That's not the hard part. The hard part is that depression, because it takes a lot of pieces to really negotiate that. So we'll talk about that next time. Send us your questions again. Let us know what you think. It would help. The questions will help us to get a little more what people need in order to.
And how they're hearing us.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Next time.
Thank you for listening to City Shrinks. Stay tuned for future episodes where we answer your questions, hear your challenges, and hold everybody accountable.
Be sure to rate, review, and follow us on Instagram at City Shrinks.